Technical difficulties. Welcome to Feed Your Mind from Coping to Thriving. This program is sponsored by the Laura W. Bush Institute for Women's Health, and I'm Connie Tyne, Executive Director. We had to postpone from last week because of all kinds of weather problems and IT shutdowns and building shutdowns. So we're so happy that you were able to join us today. As usual, we do have a chat feature on our webinars. So if questions come up as we're going through the interview process, please feel free to put your questions in there, because we do have an outstanding program today. And I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce you to one of my favorite people who actually has lots of fans already who I'm sure are tuned in to be with us today and to get to see Dr. Harris again. Dr. Kitty Harris is an emeritus professor at Texas Tech University, where she has served for 12 years as the director for the Center of the Study of Addiction and Recovery. Under her leadership, that center gained national attention, and she appeared in the Wall Street Journal, The Today Show, CNN, and New York Times, just to name a few. And that program itself was duplicated on university campuses across the United States. Dr. Harris is a licensed chemical dependency counselor, as well as a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's the author of Women and Recovery, Finding Hope, and co-editor of the Substance Abuse Recovery in College. Her awards, frankly, are too numerous to mention. I will tell you also, Dr. Harris wrote and produced a program, recoveronline.org, and it represents the future of addiction treatment. It uses the latest technology and provides a cost-effective substance use disorder program for people across the United States and removes many of the barriers to treatment. Now, you may know, I just noticed this from a report last week, that in 2018, there were over 18 million Americans in need of alcohol and drug disorder treatment who got no treatment at all. There is no better person who we could turn to at a time like this for help than the very special Dr. Kitty Harris. So welcome, Dr. Harris.
Thank you so much, Connie. Thank you for those very kind words. I appreciate it so much.
Well, let's get started. These have been really trying times. And of course, you have been professionally and personally involved in the field of addiction and recovery for many years. Do you think this past year has led to more addiction challenges, shall we say, for the rank and file for most of us?
Oh, yes. A resounding yes, I would say. One of the things that the pandemic has done has promoted social isolation. And One of the things that we struggle with so much when you look at addictive disorders is a sense of isolation and feeling apart from and separated from. So much of what has happened as a result of what we've all been through literally this past year, and I can't believe it's been a year, it's hard for me to think about it that way, has been that sense of being cut off from other people, of being isolated, and of being in a position where a lot of people haven't left home much. That they are seriously in a situation where they aren't able to get out, they aren't able to be around, they aren't able to connect with other people. And so many of the elements that really focus on addiction have been at their peak during this time. So I don't think there's any question. I think the research bears this out. Some of the most recent studies talk about the increase in substance use disorder. They talk about the increase in mental health issues, especially, and I hate to say this, among adolescents and young adults that are used to very active lifestyles and interaction. And so I'm afraid that through no fault of our own, we have put ourselves in a position where those type things and those type struggles have really come to the forefront.
Well, and add to the stress that so many people's employment is insecure. They've lost jobs, or they have a job, then they don't come in. Then we've become teachers, of our children, a job that we probably abdicated when they were 4. And, now at 14 or whatever, we're going, oh dear, this is hard. So I guess there's a tremendous amount of stress, maybe even more stress than usual.
Yes, and you brought up some perfect examples of that. You're right. People that have not really considered themselves as teachers have found themselves teaching their children, and that is difficult. I'm a teacher, and I know how difficult it is. If I had to teach young children at home, I'm not sure what I would do. That would be so hard. And so the stress of finding ourselves in situations we haven't found ourselves in, the unemployment that you mentioned is another thing. You think about that, you get up, you get dressed, you go to work, and all of a sudden, that's not what you do. You get up, you might not even get dressed, you might keep your PJs on and sit at home all day, which leads to the opportunity for those kinds of behaviors that we often find comfort us, and yet they become behaviors that we struggle with down the road if overused.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I thought maybe we should begin by looking inward and just asking everyone who's with us today to take a look at their own habits and behaviors and just ask themselves, is there any area of my life that might need a little attention? And I think what particularly comes to mind with that for me is there anything I'd just as soon not talk about, or that am I hiding things? Am I being a little secretive about things? So I guess if we start with ourselves, that's the most fair thing to do.
Yes. And that is the most important thing to do, and the most frightening thing to do, and the most challenging thing to do is look at ourselves. One of the things that I learned early on in this field, there's so much to know technologically, there's so much to know scientifically, there's so much to know clinically, but I'm kind of one of those people that likes the simple things that actually give you a sense of what's going on with yourself. And one of the things that I've used a lot through the years is just a very simple phrase. If it's causing a problem, it is a problem. And that's one of the ways to look at ourselves and say, is my behavior causing a problem? Is the fact that I ate an entire package of Oreo cookies, is that a problem? Well, maybe, or maybe not. But maybe 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 pounds down the road, it could be a problem. Is the fact that I had a couple of glasses of wine with lunch, is that a problem? Well, maybe if I had to drive the kids, to a playground to play outside for a few minutes with masks on, that could be a problem. And so when we look inside, I think it's important that we do so not with a critical nature or critical heart. That doesn't really do us any good. If we look inside from the standpoint of, is my behavior causing a problem in my life, or with regard to the people in my life? Is my husband upset that I ate the whole package of Oreo cookies? Is someone upset that I had too much to drink? Does my family feel like I am so glued to social media and technology that I have nothing to say to them? I have nothing to bring to them. And so when you begin looking at these overindulgences, and I love, Connie, that you phrase it that way, when you begin to look at those, part of what you have to ask yourself is, are those behaviors interfering in any other part of my life that I should be aware of or I should pay attention to?
Well, that's a tough one, but I think you're right. That's where we have to start. I think probably a question that a lot of people would like to know is, what do we do when we have serious concern about someone close to us who may seem to be losing control? This is especially tricky because in my own life, having dealt with this situation, I know that people are extremely defensive and see any mention of their behavior being inappropriate as highly critical. And, I'm fine, leave me alone, mind your own business. How do we get into that?
Um, you know, that's a sticky one. I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat it for you. It's always hard to do what we call in the field intervening, how to intervene on somebody else's behavior. And I can tell you that it's never pleasant and it's never a fun thing to do. It's never anything that any of us would look forward to, but there are some tips I can share with you that can make it a little bit easier. And the first one is this: you should never, ever, ever intervene on someone or approach someone unless it's out of love and care. And that's number one. It shouldn't be out of shaming. It shouldn't be out of blaming. It shouldn't be out of trying to guilt somebody into doing different behaviors. What it needs to be out of is out of love, care, and concern.
What does that sound like?
Okay, well, I'm so glad you asked. I can tell you exactly what that sounds like. It sounds like this: I love you. I care about you. I'm afraid something's wrong. What can I do to help? I love you. I care about you. I'm afraid something's wrong. What can I do to help? As opposed, and I think I should mention this so we can compare and contrast, as opposed to, I am so sick and tired of your behavior, and if you don't get your act together, I'm out of here.
That's hard.
And that's so much of what we hear sometimes, and what we know that our kind of initial reaction might be. But that's not what it needs to be. I love you. I care about you. I'm afraid something's wrong. What can I do to help? Now, I don't want to sugarcoat it so much to say that will always bring about a positive reaction, because it won't. I do not live in fantasy land. After all these years in the field, I do not live in fantasy land. And you're going to have people that no matter what you say, and no matter how loving and caring you are, they're going to say, I won't use the words that might be a little bit profane, but they're going to say, it's none of your business.
Right.
And I don't care what you think. And I don't care, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what I've dealt with. You don't know what my life is like. And there are always, and I have done throughout my career, I have done numerous interventions with family members, and they're orchestrated and all that kind of thing. And there have been some that have been really positive, and I've had a wonderful result. And there have been some that have been despairingly awful. And I've had some of those.
Dr. Hare, is it better to not try this on your own, but to gather other people so that you gang up on them a little bit? Just, or do you start like gently, like you first said, and then if that doesn't work, you go to step 2 or step 3? And then when do we bring in a professional?
Okay, those are all really good questions. So I think that initially, if you've tried, I love you, I care about you, I'm worried, what can I do to help? And you get no response or minimal response and no change, then I think then you do go to a next step. And maybe a couple of family members might come together and do something similar. I think that you go to a professional when you really feel like that's I hate to say it this way, that's what it's going to take. That it's like, okay, I'm serious about this. I am worried. I'm worried about your health. I'm worried about your life. I'm worried about our family. I'm worried about, whatever. And at that point, I think sometimes the best and only solution is to bring in a professional to help. Interestingly, many, many, many years ago, oh gosh, back in the 70s, I don't hate to date myself. I was very, very young back then, just probably a teenager. And there was a group called the Johnson Institute that specialized in looking at addiction and substance use disorder treatment and interventions. And they actually put together a model of intervention where it is a group of people that's led by a professional. Family members, people from potentially an office place or a church or a civic organization that come together to really say, we love you and you have got to get some help. So there are professional models and professional ways to do interventions. And I think it really just is up to the family to decide if that's the best step.
I think as we're talking, I'm thinking alcohol and substance use issues because that's kind of where my brain goes.
Right.
But I guess that today, I know I have heard that some professionals, especially professional men and women who have high-powered positions and they're at home, are going through what you mentioned, which is they don't have any time for their family. They're constantly on their devices and they're physically at home, but they're not giving any time to the people around them. And conversely, then we have the kids that are basically have just abdicated all in favor of gaming.
Oh.
And I have said to a family member of mine, have you thought about just taking it away or turning it off? But they honestly believe that there would be complete decompensation in that would be, it's such a lifeline and such a way of using time that they're afraid. They're honestly afraid to approach teenagers with something that could be that radical. I would guess that at times people would even fear, that there could be some sort of a physical response. They might come after you or, clobber you or steal it back. I don't know. I mean, it can get really complicated when we go into some of those other behaviors that I think people probably are dealing with.
Oh, Connie, you're so correct, and you're so on target. There's actually been a field of study that's emerging and it's technology addiction. Mm-hmm. And there's been some basic research done, and there's been some follow-up studies done on people that literally become addicted to technology. It's like, this is where my lifeblood is. This is where and this is a part that scares me, especially after, when we talk about social isolation. This is where my friends are. My friends are on Facebook. My friends are not in this room with me having lunch. They're on Facebook. And so we're beginning to look at a couple of things. Number one, what is that about? What is the interest? What is the pull? What is the dynamic that pulls you in? One of the things we know about behaviors is behaviors that are exhibited over and over and over and over again can become compulsive and can become addictive. And so whether it's social media or computers or cell phones. And I would say that you are correct. If you took a group of adolescents and threatened to take away all of their technology, you would have a riot. I mean, I have no doubt you would have a riot. And I think that luckily, I think I'm getting to the point I may not have to deal with that professionally, but those coming behind me are going to have a real challenge in looking at technology as an addictive disorder.
Right.
And I think that certainly the criteria will look a little bit different, but I definitely think it's there. And the other point that you bring up as a sideline to that is that we do think about alcohol and drugs when we talk about addictive disorders. And one of the things that I have heard a lot about through the pandemic has also been what we look at as disordered eating. Well, that there's jokes everywhere about, I can't wear the clothes I could wear a year ago because I sat at home and ate, COVID,
and so, the college 20, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so when you think about when you think about compulsive overuse of technology or compulsive overuse of food or compulsive overuse of alcohol or drugs. And even, I don't like to talk about this one, it hits a little bit close to home, but even compulsive overuse of exercise or running. And I'm a runner, and so I have to say, that's probably enough miles for today. And, but any behavior that becomes a substitute for dealing with feelings or experiences has the potential of becoming, a type of addictive disorder.
That's a really good point, because we certainly do see, especially in depression, some people use exercise as a way of avoiding the problems and forgetting things. So thanks for bringing that up too.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So when it comes to recovery, now we've really got a broad field here. Is there a big difference in trying to recover from food or gaming or alcohol, or, we've got a broad field here. So does recovery, is it different?
Yes and no.
Good answer.
Yes, it's different in that depending upon the behavior, some of the choices you use become different. No, it's not different in that every time you look at recovery from an addictive disorder, whatever it might be, you're looking at changing your behavior. And that becomes the consistent piece that runs throughout, is that whatever I'm doing that's not okay and that's not serving me well indicates I need to change my behavior. And so if you eat I'll go back to my, I think when they were Oreos, I said, if you eat a bag of Oreo cookies, you are not going to be pulled over by a policeman probably for weaving down the road.
Right.
Although you could have a little bit of a sugar high and, whatever. But no one is going to get hurt from that except for yourself. So the consequences are different. You mentioned the gaming or the professional that comes home and does nothing but stay on a computer or something. And so the consequence are going to be family issues, a sense of being isolated from your family, shut off from being, a great dad or mom or whatever, because of that. And so the consequences of each one of the behavior categories is going to be different. Excuse me, the recovery is also going to look a little bit different in that it will address the specific behaviors that you're trying to alter. But recovery at a baseline is going to be somewhat similar. I'm choosing to change. These are the things I need to do to change. And this is the kind of support I need in being able to produce that kind of change.
So I know that, we often say, I wouldn't take my alcoholic brother to a bar for lunch. There are environmental things we can do in some cases. I can not have alcohol in my house. Even from a healthy eating standpoint, you can basically change the groceries that you bring into the house so that at least you're not tempted, at least you're not walking by the cookie jar, 3 times, 4 times a day, thinking that cookie is just waiting for me. And some of these other situations, though, especially when it's part of your job, technically, technological things that you're going to be on your phone, you're going to be on your computer, and then so you've got to do that. Now you've got to somehow manage your behavior. And I guess in some ways, since we decided we can't take the gaming away from the kids completely, I don't know if you have to go pull the plug, or I really don't know how you taper down. I mean, it's almost easier to stop and let the cravings begin to subside. Not that they're ever really gone, but you can at least start to change your habits. And it seems to me it would be harder when you're really talking about behaviors that you're going to have to continually engage in.
Well, and I would say you have really done your homework because you're really correct about that. In many ways, it's much easier to completely stop or abstain from a behavior than it is to taper or moderate a behavior. And that's one of the things that we struggle with when we look at dealing with, addictive disorders, is that certainly with substance use disorder, the primary focus is abstinence. Mm-hmm. And then support from other recovery groups. And I think that when you look at, and this is such an interesting contrast, and the research on it's been really good. It's not my particular field of expertise, but I know enough to be dangerous, I guess, is that one of the struggles with eating disorders and disordered eatings is you can't just stop eating.
Right.
You have to learn to moderate and or make better choices. Mm-hmm. And that is much more difficult than just to completely stop. And so one of the things that, and you're right about that with technology also, you might want to be able to stop your use of technology, but giving up your cell phone might be the worst choice you could make, especially if you have children that might need to contact you, or their school needs to contact you, or whatever. And so part of what's interesting when we begin to look at compulsive behaviors and different things from a recovery standpoint is that with substance use, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that abstinence is certainly, because we know of the disease process in the body, it is certainly the very best choice. With many of the other struggles, it oftentimes is not possible. And you have to look at what does moderation look like? What behaviors can I change? Can I put that cookie jar in the cabinet for a while? Can I say that we're only going to use technology in the house from 7 until 9, and then that's it? I know families that struggle, this almost sounds ancient, but they struggle with television that way, that have said the television in our house is only going to be on from 7 till 9 at night, and that's it. We're not going to sit in front of the television all night and not interact with each other. So depending upon the behaviors depends on looking for the most successful means of moderating that particular behavior.
Right. Well, why don't you write your next book on that one?
Oh, okay. Well, let me think about that. I actually have something else I'm working on, but it's not that. But I'll consider that as a possibility. Thank you.
Okay, good. So let me say this: once we've identified for ourselves or for someone else that things are not right, that we are starting to have some self-awareness, or even the loved ones will admit that their behavior is getting a little out of control. It seems to me that leads to a tremendous sense. I know for me personally, I would be very disappointed in myself. I'd be mad at myself. And probably along with that would be a lot of guilt. I'd feel guilty. Oh my gosh, I haven't been taking care of my kids properly. Or, oh my gosh, I've spent all my money at the liquor store. Or, now that I've become addicted to Candy Crush, I don't return phone calls. No matter what it is, I'd start to feel guilty, or I'd have this sense of shame. And then that really can lead to depression, right? I mean, self-awareness can become a very sad place.
You're one of the best interviewers I've ever had. I mean, that is so awesome. You're right. You're 100% right. Is that when you really begin to look at your behavior and the consequences, then one of the first things that you experience is a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And the realization, I've disappointed myself, I've disappointed my family, I've let my company down, whatever, that's broad, whatever it comes to. So I have a couple of things to say about that. I know you're not surprised that I would have a couple of things to say about it. First of all, one of the one of the best researchers in the country today is someone that I'm sure many people are familiar with, Renee Brown.
Sure.
And she is a professor at the University of Houston, and all of her focus and her research, and it's all been qualitative research, which means she's done thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews and found the consistency in responses, has been on guilt and shame.
Oh.
And her work on that not only has made her a top author and one of the most viewed TED Talks ever done, but what it has done is it's struck a chord in so many people in looking at the part and the role that guilt and shame have played in their lives. And so anybody that has a particular interest in that, I encourage you. My favorite of her book was called The Gifts of Imperfection, and it is worth a read. It's a fairly easy read in terms of getting through it. It's a tough emotional read in terms of getting through it, but it's really good. What I want to say about guilt and shame the most is this: is I would encourage you to separate those out. Guilt is feeling bad about something you've done. You know, I feel bad. I ran a stoplight on my way over here this afternoon. I didn't really, but I would feel bad about that if I did. You know, I forgot to pick up the Oreo cookies at the grocery store, and I know that my husband's going to be looking for those today. I feel bad about that. I feel some guilt about that. So guilt is feeling bad about what you've done. Shame is feeling bad about who you are.
Whoa, that's a big difference.
Oh, it's huge. It's a huge difference, Connie. It's huge because all of us should have a little bit of guilt now and then. I mean, you know, I can certainly tell you a couple of things this week I've done I kind of feel bad about. And I feel bad about how I used some of my time and how I didn't get some calls returned. And, you know, I do that, seems like every day. But the shame is that very internal sense of I'm not okay. I'm not enough. I'm bad.
That is so tragic. And that's when we hear, I mean, I'm going to just say that sounds like you're too good for me. You'd be better off without me. I don't deserve your time and help. Think words like that.
Yes, no, you nailed it. That's it. Is that you would be and the one I hate the most is you would be better off without me. Mm-hmm. You know, and that has little, you know, suicidal ideations attached to it, which scares me a lot. Mm-hmm. But that sense of I'm no good, I'm worthless, I should have never been born. You know, I have heard those kind of statements so many times from people that are actually going into addiction treatment centers. And oftentimes at that point, they're at their peak of desperation. They're at their peak of shame. The things I feel so bad about the things I've done. As I look back at my life, I realize the things I've ruined, the things I haven't done well, the mistakes I've made. And so there is no doubt that, and I would say this in general, I won't say it specifically, that at the very bottom of many addictive disorders, the struggle is with the shame. It is a lot.
So the word that we love is resilience.
Yes.
The word that you write about is
yes.
We build resilience, we become more resilient, we help others with their resilience. How in the world do we do that? Question. Just a simple question.
That's a simple question. Well, and I've got a simple answer for you. So we're in good shape. We're in good shape. That's one of my favorite, that's one of my special research areas. And I love it. I love resilience. And this is why. There's nothing better than being absolutely at the bottom of a barrel and feeling like you can bounce back. And that's what resilience is. Resilience is that ability to bounce back, to come back, to be at a position where you wish you were and you had been before. What we've learned about resilience is so interesting, and part of it I almost hate to say today because it is so diametrically opposed to what we've had to do with the pandemic. One of the number one factors in building resilience, and we've learned this in looking at many college students that have struggled with addictive disorders across the country. And part of what we found that the number one factor in building back resilience was social support. And that's what you find.
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
Just what we don't have right now.
That's right. And that's the part why I even hate to say it, is because we don't have it. And what we've learned is that with all of these areas that we've talked about that are compulsive behaviors or addictive disorders or whatever, that one of the most important factors in recovery and in resilience is that ability to have social support and a social support network. One of the reasons in substance use disorder that there's been such success with Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, all of those groups is because they provide the number one most important thing for resilience, which is social support. Well, and if you begin to look at what that
can do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see someone maybe who looks like they had the problem you did, and somehow they have come through it. And so you hope and pray that because they could do it, maybe you can do it too. And until you see an example of that, you may not even believe it's possible.
No. Oh, you're so right. It's like, oh my gosh, you made it. Maybe I can make it.
Right.
You were able to, you were even in a worse position than I was, and you made it. So there's hope for me. And resilience in so many ways is about having that hope enough to put yourself out there to come back, to say, I can do this. I've got what it takes, to do this. And I think that I'm a really big believer that the greatest asset any of us have are our relationships. I believe that with all my heart. That ability to have people to connect to, that you care about, that you love, that, whether it's friends or coworkers or family members, they are our greatest asset in terms of resilience and that ability to feel like we belong in this world and we have a contribution to make. One other thing that I want to mention too about resilience is that we found three factors that were really, really significant. Number one, way statistically more significant than any of them, was social support. The second one, which I thought was very interesting, but during the pandemic, I've started to understand it even more. The second one was what we call structured style. And what that means is that you live your life in somewhat of a structured way. That if you're to be resilient, you're going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're going to go have a cup of coffee and you're going to come back and you're going to make the bed and you're going to get in the shower and you're going to go to work. And what we found was that people that were able to live within a lifestyle of structured style became more resilient because they had a pattern to follow. And one of the things with the pandemic that I think has been hard is we've lost a lot of that structured style. So I may get up and work from home. Well, there's a good chance I'm going to, I'm probably not going to put any makeup on. I got to tell you, or I may not do my hair for that day. And so that changes my style. I think about, and I cannot remember his name, and I always think I'm going to make a note of this, and I don't. There was a general or a army, someone that was famous that gave a graduation speech a couple of years ago, And it became so famous. And the most important part that became famous is he said, make your bed. You want to be successful? Make up your bed. And it was like, oh my gosh, he gets it. He understands structured style, because that begins a pattern of making decisions to do certain things in your life. And the last one, just real briefly, I won't belabor this because I think we all get it. The third factor we found was family support. And that family support really builds resilience. You know, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm behind you. I'm going to help you, you know, and that's important.
Well, I think if we can try not to lose faith in that person, but it's really hard. And actually, one of our questions that's come in from our viewers ties in with this. And I will just say that from personal experience, when people are struggling, when that person you love is struggling, they are not really truth tellers. And sometimes they don't tell you the truth. And then you lose trust. And then just when you need to say to them, look, you're a good person. I know you can do this. You kind of aren't sure you believe it. And so one of our questions, and I'll let you just tie in with this, is
Okay.
what is the advice on how to help someone who refuses assistance or intervention?
And that is the most difficult thing to do when it comes to addictive disorders or any kind of addiction. And I would say a couple of things. I think the first thing you do is that you give it your best shot. And whether you intervene, or you get family members to come together to intervene, or you get a professional to help you, is that you get that person in a situation where you say what we talked about. I love you. I care about you. We know you're in trouble. I know you're in trouble. What can we do to help? And unfortunately, that's almost all you can do. You can do things, you can take car keys away. You can, I've had parents unfortunately lock kids out of the house because they knew they were, using drugs or drinking. And some of the consequences of that can be very scary. But there's so many things that you can try to do to make it better. And then this is what I need for you to hear, that I think is the most important, but not particularly helpful for the person that's struggling. After you've done everything you can do, and you've tried to intervene, and you've done all the appropriate things, you need to lay your head on that pillow at night and know that you did your best, that you've done your best. I mean, there are people that resist change, that aren't willing to help themselves, that aren't willing to go through what it takes to change, or that don't even want to accept the fact they may need to. And there is nothing that I know of beyond a lot of prayers and professional help that's going to change that.
I totally understand that. And thank you so much for that, because we don't want to transfer the guilt to the survivor, basically. And for them to spend their life thinking, if I had just thought of something else to do, if I had loved you more, if I had drawn a line earlier, if I had done tough love. And, we all do the very best we can today with the information we have today. And so it's really not fair to look back, is it?
No. And I'm so glad you said that, Connie, because that's one of the things that I think is important. And I think of it a lot. I've done the very best I can with what I've got. I've given it my best shot. And there are, I've worked with people that, did everything I could, the best treatment in the country, the best follow-up, the best everything I know to do that helps. And there are some of them that aren't with us today, and you have to get past that point of personal responsibility and guilt, if in fact that you've done all you know to do, because that's all any of us can. None of us are miracle workers, unfortunately. I wish we were.
I do too. Well, so Dr. Harris, what is recovery look like? And I guess we're never, I mean, the definition is that we're not cured. You know, when you have a true addiction, it is not actually curable, but it is certainly manageable. And so we spend many, many years a day at a time, right, in recovery.
Right.
So talk to us about the recovery period and what that looks like and how we support people who are in recovery.
Oh, and that's a great question. And you said one of the things that's the key word you find in recovery, a day at a time, is that recovery is about changing your behavior a day at a time. Recovery is about making the choice to change your behavior a day at a time. Recovery is about believing in yourself enough to be willing and able to change your behavior a day at a time. Recovery is exciting. Recovery is a chance to, a second chance at life for most people. A lot of people in recovery, I worked so many years with college students in recovery, and I will tell you, and I've done a lot of stuff. I've been in private practice. I ran the Center for the Study of Addiction and Recovery at Tech, like you mentioned. I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of program development. There is nothing that was as exciting to me as to watch those kids here at Texas Tech change their lives. Nothing. There won't be anything else I will do the rest of my life that will be as fulfilling or as exciting to watch them go into recovery because they got a do-over. They got to redo their lives, and many of them are. I've got a couple now that I've kept up with. They've been through law school. They've been through medical school. They're married. They have kids. They're living wonderful, productive lives, and through a recovery program. And so the thing about, if I had to pick one word that I thought characterized recovery, it would be hope. I have hope that what I can do, will make a difference. I have hope that my life matters. I have hope that I can give back to those that are still suffering. And one of the most important, I think, pieces in recovery is that concept and that idea of giving back, that it's so important, to be able to give to others the way you were given to. So I think recovery is characterized by hope, by meaning, that ability to live a meaningful life, the ability to be in a position where you feel like you've been given a second chance. You have the opportunity to give that to others. So where people think about, recovery, I think about, recovery, it's that excitement of being blessed with a chance to make a difference.
They're some of the most joyful people that I know. They're people who are filled with gratitude and are so ready to help the next person.
Yeah.
Let's do a couple questions here that have come in since we were talking. One is, I like this. Some of us call our vice. Some of us say we have a little vice.
Right.
Isn't a vice an addiction, whether it's Netflix, binging, or chocolate?
I love it. Okay, and that's a great, whoever sent that's a great question. So I think that's a word that's used very often with behaviors that can become out of control. And I would go back to what we talked about earlier. Is your vice causing a problem in your life? And if you like to eat a box of chocolates and you don't feel like that it's causing you any health problems, or weight problems that contribute to health problems, is there anything wrong with that? Not to me. Pick good chocolates if you're going to eat them. Yeah, that's right.
Become an addiction.
Yeah.
Okay. This question is from one of our guests. What's the difference between an eating disorder and disordered eating?
Okay, that's an excellent question also. And some of that gets pretty clinical, which I probably won't get into diagnostically, but I would say disordered eating are patterns of eating that you find yourself in that probably aren't what we would consider normative. A different pattern than what would be a normal day-to-day pattern we would think of, quote, most people.
Or as you might say, health-inducing. I mean,
yes,
normal. I'm always careful with normal because normal does not necessarily mean healthy.
Yeah.
So what would be considered a normally healthy pattern?
Yeah, and mostly like what we would say normative, which means it's not normal, but it has characteristics. Eating disorders is a diagnostic criteria that looks at typically bulimia or anorexia. And anorexia is the withholding of food, which provides more of a starvation experience for the body. And the bulimia is the obsessiveness with food that can involve actually a significant overeating and then purging or vomiting or purging with laxatives. And so the disordered eating might not really cause a problem except potentially health problems here and there. The eating disorder can cause a lot of problems, especially with health and with family issues. And also, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier, a huge amount of guilt and shame, especially with the bulimia. We find a lot of that.
Okay, good. I think that really will help. Here's an interesting question. Are we finding that women are more impacted than men since we typically assume more of the responsibility at home?
Oh, wow.
It's a loaded gun, isn't it?
Okay, so there are some studies that have shown an increase in women's use of alcohol and other drugs, oftentimes sedative type drugs. And the attributing factors can be, I'm the one that carries the responsibility, or I do the heavy lifting around the house. And the one trend that we're seeing that I really hate the most is we're seeing an increase in women showing up in treatment. We're seeing an increase in women struggling with not only with addiction disorders, but with eating disorders and things like that. I think finding the motive behind that we're still looking at some of that. Is it due to extra responsibilities? Is it due to a sense of aloneness and loneliness? Oftentimes, yes. Is it a sense of not being valued? Oftentimes, yes. So I think women are definitely at risk these days, maybe more than ever before. And there's some conflicting evidence about that in terms of, because with more women in the workplace, has that in fact increased their willingness to engage in other behaviors?
Even biologically, there is some evidence that women can become addicted to opioids and to alcohol with at lower doses and with less exposure. So yes. I think biologically and physiologically, the female anatomy may have a lower threshold, possibly. I don't know. Dr. Susan Ferguson at Texas Tech Health Sciences Center is doing research on alcohol use disorder that's very interesting, and that does fall along this line.
Yes, absolutely. And part of it's body weight, and part of it are sleeping patterns. And there's a lot of different variables that I think can definitely impact it in terms of women. And there's some studies that show that women actually can get into recovery earlier. And there's some interesting work being done on that too.
So I won't say that sometimes women are less stubborn than men, because that would sound a little bit sexist. So I'm just not going to say that. So pretend I didn't. And let's move on to the last question.
Okay.
I feel that you need to treat the psychological well-being as well as the physiologic conditions that come along with addictions.
Absolutely. Addiction or any compulsive disorder, it's not one-sided. There's not just one single facet. So physiologically, it has to be treated, especially alcohol. Alcohol withdrawal can be deadly, absolutely deadly. And withdrawal from other medications can be really, really uncomfortable, and you may want to die. But so physiologically, you definitely have to treat the withdrawal syndromes and all of that from the addiction. Psychologically, there's so many things to look for. Is there an underlying depression? Is there an underlying anxiety disorder? Is there an underlying personality disorder? And being able to find out all the multifacets of what drove the behavior and what initially maybe contributed to the behavior. So many people that have anxiety disorders turn to alcohol. And do you know why? It works. That's why it works. I'm scared. I'm anxious.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. Let me have a glass of wine, and I'll have a glass of wine. And you know what? I'm pretty chill, at least for a while. And so part of what you find is that a lot of people that struggle with alcohol or drugs, you're going to find an underlying depression, underlying anxiety. And the other thing, and this has been some more recent work that's been done, is oftentimes with addictive disorders, you find sometimes an underlying trauma experience. That there has been some type of trauma experience in childhood, young adulthood, whatever, that has contributed to the alcohol or drug use in order literally to just survive the memories or the circumstances of the trauma. So yes, it's really important to treat we like to call it the whole person, to treat them physiologically, psychologically, spiritually, everything, that the whole person is who got sick, and it's the whole person who then we need to help get well.
What a perfect way to end this amazing hour. I can't thank you enough, Dr. Harris. You are amazing. And all the wisdom that you've shared with us today, I know is going to mean a lot to lots of folks. I will mention to everyone who's here that this will be, that this has been recorded. And so you can find it on our YouTube channel, Laura Bush Institute, in a couple of days. And so if you want to share it with friends or others, it'll be up there for all to see. And we just thank you for joining us today. Our next webinar will be April 8th, is what we're planning for, and it'll be awesome. And we'll send out information on that when we get a little closer, so we don't clog up your inbox right now. But thank you all for joining us today, and most especially thank you, Dr. Harris, for your wisdom and your experience. And I want to also just say one more time, if you have someone who is looking for some substance or alcohol abuse treatment, check out recoveronline.org. recoveronline.org. It is that online treatment that Dr. Harris was very instrumental in creating and building. And it's a resource that has already helped many, many people in a wonderfully anonymous way, which I think is important for a lot of folks, depending on their profession and so forth. So thank you so much. I guess we'll say goodbye. See you real soon. Thanks.